Hey guys, and welcome to the Lean Basics series. Now, whenever I talk about Lean, I always like to introduce the history first. After that, we'll go through a basic simulation that'll take us through some of the concepts that we'll further develop on this website. Now, it's debatable where Lean truly began, and so many people have contributed to it, but I'm going to start the history lesson with Adam Smith, then Eli Whitney, Frederick Taylor, Henry Ford, Kiichiro Toyota, Edward Deming, Taiichi Ohno, then Jim Womack. So let's start a lesson with Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a Scottish moral philosopher, and he authored a book called The Wealth of Nations. And in it, he makes a strong case for capitalism and free trade. He also has a theory called the invisible hand theory, and that states that you can benefit society by pursuing your own goals. Now, his true contribution to Lean came from his division of labor theory. This theory states that you can take a large, complex task and break it down into smaller and smaller subtasks. Those subtasks are then divided into numerous workers, and as a collective, they're more efficient than if a single worker was to take the entire task and try to complete it himself. So, what he did was went to a pin-making factory to test his theory. Each worker could only complete 20 pins per day on average. He took the tasks that went into making the pin and broke them up into 18 different steps. He divided those steps into 10 workers. So each of the 10 workers would complete just their portion and then pass it on to the next worker, who would then take it a little bit further into completion. So these 10 workers are actually able to make 48,000 pins. So we see a huge productivity gain just from his division of labor theory. Next we have Eli Whitney. Now, a lot of you know him as the inventor of the cotton gin, but what you probably didn't know was he invented the cotton gin to help abolish slavery. He wanted to create a mechanism that would make slave labor obsolete, but unfortunately, once you combine slave labor with this new tool, it actually caused a boom in the industry. But Eli Whitney's contribution to Lean came in the form of standardized parts. Prior to Eli Whitney, if you wanted a rifle made for you, you'd go to a craftsman who would craft you a unique gun. Now, unfortunately, if the gun went bad, you'd have to take it back to that craftsman who would make that unique part for you all over again. Eli Whitney was a proponent of standard parts for standard guns, interchangeable parts. So in 1798, he took 10 guns, went before Congress, disassembled them, put them inside of a bag, shook them up, and reassembled them, and all 10 guns worked. Congress was so impressed with this that they went with standardized guns for the U.S. military from that point forward. So Eli Whitney's contribution to Lean came in the form of standard parts. Next we have Frederick Taylor, who was a mechanical engineer and one of the first management consultants. He was a big proponent of finding the one best way of performing a task. He was the first to use scientific theory and apply that to management. So he wrote a book called The Principles of Scientific Management. So he was the guy that would go on the shop floor and see how everybody was performing a task. He would then use a scientific method to find the single best way to perform that task. So his contribution to Lean was laying the groundwork for standardized work. Next we have Henry Ford, who is one of my personal heroes. Now, a lot of people like to villainize him because he is the father of mass production, but I do think mass production was a key step to developing Lean as we see it today. He really was a true genius of his time, and he's credited with coming up with a moving assembly line. The story goes as he went to a slaughterhouse and watched cows being moved along this moving line. Each worker would take off whatever portion he was responsible for. So he'd take off the hind quarter, and the next cow would come, and the worker would take off the hind quarter again and again and again. He reversed this, and then started assembling cars based off of this. So he not only made the moving assembly line, but he applied Smith's division of labor along with Frederick Taylor's one best way. And he applied those to the moving assembly line and gained great efficiency off of that. He also was the first to create standardized parts within automobiles. So different models looked radically different on the outside, but inside they shared a lot of common parts, which brought down manufacturing costs. So his contribution to Lean was the moving assembly line along with standardized parts within automobiles. Next we have the Toyota family. Now, I'll talk about the Toyota family as a whole, but I'm just going to list the name Kiichiro Toyota. Now, if you know anything about the Toyota family, they started out in the textile industry. Each worker at the time would sit in front of a loom and watch the machine run. If a thread broke, they would have to hit the stop button quickly, fix the thread, and hit the start button again. What they invented was something called an automatic loom, which would stop every time a thread broke. It would detect it. So what that did was it freed up a lot of workers. So one worker could now watch 10 machines instead of a 1-to-1 ratio. They took this technology and sold it to a European firm and funded what is known as Toyota Motors today. They sent a team to study the Ford system, and they quickly realized that they couldn't keep up because Ford was producing for the masses, whereas Toyota was getting orders for one truck here, 2 cars there. Each order could be unique. So they invented a system called just-in-time to accommodate. Next we have Edwards Deming, who was the father of quality at the source. Now Deming originally approached the big three with his theories on quality and quality at the source. They didn't listen to him, so he took his theories over to Japan, where they did listen to him, and you can see the vast improvements in quality Japan has had since Deming brought over his theories. Now, he was also the first to apply statistical methods on the shop floor in manufacturing, and his plan, do, check, act wheel is actually still in use today. It's still very relevant, a great tool to use. His 14 principles of management really laid out the groundwork for quality at the source. So his contribution to lean was quality. Next we have Taiichi Ohno, who is another one of my personal heroes. He is the father of the Toyota production system and literally wrote the book called The Toyota Production System. He describes in detail in the book just-in-time and Jidoka, and his book is the first to link the two. His contribution to lean, too many to discuss. I'll be referring to him a lot during the site, so here's the man, Taiichi Ohno. Next we have Jim Womack, who is the author of The Machine That Changed the World. Now in the book he compares Japanese, American, and European automotive manufacturing techniques. And during his research at MIT, the term lean was coined by a researcher working under him named John Kravchuk. Now John Kravchuk is now president and CEO of Hyundai USA, and you can see the amazing amounts of quality improvements that they've made over the last 5 or 10 years. Now, lean thinking is another one of those staples for lean practitioners. Jim Womack wrote, absolute must read, his contribution to lean, helping to coin the term, along with putting into a system that we can understand. So let's take a look at Toyota today. In the 1970s, you can see that gas prices actually went up because of the oil crisis, and so Americans were looking for smaller, more fuel-efficient Japanese cars to replace their bigger automobiles. The price of gas went down, but the Japanese kept the foresight to look to hybrid technology. So in 1997, it was ready for release just in time for gas prices to go back up. In 2005, Toyota surpassed Chrysler to become the first foreign member of the Big Three, and actually in 2008, overtook GM to become the world #1. And unfortunately in 2009, the tail end of 2009, you see the Big Three looking for a big bailout. So you and I as taxpayers are going to pay for the Big Three's inefficiency. The graph you see here was taken from Consumer Reports. You can see how many problems per 100 vehicles consumers reported by make and age of the car. You can clearly see how flat the orange line is that represents Toyota. In other words, Toyota owners experience fewer problems than owners of any other vehicle make. Notice that even a 10-year-old Toyota has fewer problems than most other makes of cars that are only 5 years old. Well, that was your brief history lesson. We'll use the rest of the site to show you the techniques they use to attain such a high level of quality and efficiency.